The West looks at China's biggest exam and sees a cold machine that turns children into joyless test-taking robots. I watched my own son walk into that exam, and I am telling you the truth is almost the opposite. That this brutal, terrifying day is one of the most sincere acts of collective hope I have ever witnessed. An entire country stopping its own traffic to tell its children something the modern world has quietly stopped believing. On one morning in June, a large part of an entire country goes quiet for a single group of teenagers. Traffic is rerouted so no horn will break their concentration. Construction near the schools falls silent. Parents stand in the heat outside locked gates for hours, not allowed in, unable to help, simply waiting. And inside those rooms, millions of young people bend over a single exam that a great many of them believe will decide the shape of the rest of their lives. I watched my own son walk through those gates, and what that day revealed to me about pressure, about hope, about how a whole civilization pours itself into its children is something I think the exhausted, striving West needs to hear, because it is not the story you have been told. If you have ever felt that your entire future was riding on one moment, one interview, one test, one chance, and felt the particular terror of that, then you already know a small piece of what this day feels like, multiplied across a country, and concentrated into a few hours. This is the Gaokao, China's national college entrance examination, and it is one of the largest and most consequential exams on the face of the earth. But this video is not really about an exam. It is about what a society reveals when it decides that something matters this much, and about a question that has haunted me as a mother, which is whether this enormous, brutal, magnificent thing we do to our children is love, or whether it is something else wearing the face of love. Let me be honest about what this is and what it isn't, because I don't want to waste the trust you gave me by clicking. I am not going to tell you that the Chinese way of educating children is superior and the West should copy it, because that would be a lie and a dangerous one, and this channel does not sell you the fantasy that some other culture has quietly solved. The thing yours struggles with. The Gaokao has real and serious costs. It has crushed people I know. I am going to be honest with you about the darkness of it before the end, because there is genuine darkness. And anyone who shows you only the inspiring side is selling you something, and I am not speaking for a billion people or for all of China, which contains every possible opinion about this exam, fierce criticism included. I am speaking as one mother who watched one son walk through those gates, and who has spent the years since trying to understand what I actually witnessed. Here is the thing that the Western picture of this usually gets wrong, stated as plainly as I can. When people in the West hear about the Gaokao, they tend to imagine cold, robotic cramming, joyless children turned into test-taking machines by pushy, unfeeling parents. And I understand why that picture exists, and there are pieces of truth in it, and I will not pretend the pressure is not real. But that picture misses the thing that is actually at the center of it, the thing that took my breath away when I finally saw it clearly, which is that the Gaokao, for all its brutality, is one of the most sincere expressions of collective hope I have ever witnessed. It is an entire society saying, with one voice, to its young people, we believe your effort can change your fate. In a world that increasingly tells people their circumstances are fixed, that the game is rigged, that where you start is where you stay, that the doors were closed before you were born, here is a country that stops its own traffic to tell its children the opposite. Not everyone can be born wealthy. Not everyone has connected parents or the right accent or a family name that opens doors. But on this one day, as much as any human system on Earth manages it, the child of a farmer in a distant province and the child of a powerful official in the capital sit for the same exam, answer the same questions, and are graded by people who will never see their faces or know their names. It is not perfect. No one who lives it would tell you it is perfect. And there are real and serious ways in which the playing field is not truly level, and the people who criticize it most fiercely are often the ones who know it best. But the aspiration at the center of it, the raw idea that a child's own effort, and not their birth, should be the thing that determines their future, is one of the oldest and most radical ideas a society can hold, and China has held some version of it for over 1,000 years, through an examination system that predates every university in the West. And whatever else you want to say about the Gaokao, and there is much to say, there is something in that idea that the modern West, which once believed in it fervently and built its whole promise upon it, has quietly let slip through its fingers, and misses without quite knowing what it misses. We are about a quarter of the way into what I most want to share, and if this is already landing, subscribe, because I make these for the specific person who senses that something in the modern world has gone soft in a way that does not actually serve people, and who wants to understand what a culture looks like when it still believes effort matters. And stay with me, because I'm about to take you inside what that day actually feels like for a family, hour by hour. And then I am going to be honest with you about the real cost, the part that keeps me up at night, because this channel does not show you only the beautiful side. So let me take you inside the day, because the human reality of it is nothing like the cold picture. And this is where you will start to feel what I felt. It does not begin on the morning of the exam. It begins years earlier, in a slow accumulation of evenings, the light on in a child's room long after the rest of the house has gone dark, the quiet sacrifices a family makes without ever announcing them, the mother who takes an extra job, the father who stops buying things for himself, the grandparents who move in to cook so the child has one less thing to think about. I remember the particular sound of those years, the soft scratch of a pencil from behind a closed door at 11 at night, the click of the lamp, the way I would stand in the hallway, not going in, because going in would have meant interrupting, and interrupting would have meant I did not trust him to carry his own effort. I remember cooking quietly so the pans would not clang. I remember my husband, who loved one small pleasure, a particular tea he bought for himself on weekends, simply stopping without a word, without ever mentioning it, because the money was needed for tutoring and because that is what you do. None of us called these things sacrifices. That word was never spoken in our home. They were simply what the years asked of us, and we gave it the way you give breath, without accounting for it. And I want you to understand that this is not martyrdom, and it is not the grim, joyless thing the outside picture imagines. There is a deep, quiet meaning in it, in a whole family orienting itself toward a single hope, in every member quietly carrying part of the weight so that no one has to carry all of it. By the time the morning arrives, the whole family has already been sitting this exam for years, in a sense, each in their own way. And on the morning itself, there is a stillness in the house that I can only describe as sacred. The stillness of a family that has done everything it can do, and now must simply let the child go and carry it alone. I made my son his favorite breakfast. I did not lecture him. There was nothing left to say that had not been said. I just watched him eat, this person I had grown inside my body and worried over for 18 years, and I understood that in a few hours he would face something entirely by himself, and that this too was the point. I wanted, more than I have ever wanted anything, to go in there with him, to sit beside him, to carry even a corner of it, and I could not. No one could. That is the terrible and beautiful truth at the center of raising a child, that you spend 18 years preparing them to walk through a door you are not allowed to follow them through, and the Gaokao simply makes that truth visible, concentrated into a single unbearable morning. And then the walk to the gates, which is a thing you have to see to believe. Streets full of families, mothers in red, because red is the color of luck, and many wear it on this day as a kind of quiet prayer stitched into cloth. Some in a traditional red dress chosen for the day precisely because of an old wish for a victorious start, a hope worn on the body when there is nothing else left to do with your hands. Fathers carrying bags of water and pencils, and the small, careful provisions of people who cannot help in any large way, and so pour themselves into the small ways, some carrying sunflowers because the word for them sounds like a wish to come first, younger siblings wide-eyed at the seriousness of it all, sensing without being told that this is one of the great days, that the person they follow around the house is about to do something enormous, and the strange, electric solidarity of thousands of families who do not know each other but who all understand in this moment exactly what everyone else is feeling, so that strangers meet each other's eyes and simply nod because what is there to say? There are volunteers handing out water, there are police holding traffic, there are teachers who have come to stand at the gates in the heat to cheer for students who are not even their own, calling out encouragement to children whose names they do not know. Because on this day, every child is, in a sense, everyone's child. There are ambulances parked quietly nearby just in case, and officials making sure the streets around the school stay silent. And there is a silence that falls as the students go in, a collective holding of breath, thousands of parents watching the backs of their children disappear through a gate, and then the long, strange, helpless wait. All these parents standing in the sun with nothing to do but hope, having handed the most precious thing in their lives over to a locked building and a sealed envelope of questions. I have never in my life felt so completely powerless and so completely part of something larger than myself at the same time. I looked around at the other mothers, and every one of them wore my own face, and I understood that whatever else the Gaokao is, it is a day when a whole society stands together at a threshold and refuses to let its children cross it feeling alone, even as it makes them cross it by themselves. We are halfway through, and before I tell you what happened when my son came out, I want you to sit with one honest question, because your answer says a lot about you and about what you truly believe, underneath the things you are supposed to say. Imagine it is your child in there, behind those gates, carrying everything. Would you rather raise a child in a world like this, where the pressure is immense but the effort is believed to matter? Where the path is at least visible and open to anyone willing to climb it, even if it is brutally, punishingly steep? Or would you rather raise them in a world that is gentler, softer, kinder in its language, with less crushing pressure and more room to breathe, but where the paths are hidden, where the important doors open quietly for those who already had the right parents, where success seems to flow to those who already had it, and where a child can do everything right, follow every rule, and still find the door closed without ever being told why? Neither is clean, neither is free. The first world can break a child with its weight. The second can break a child with its quiet hopelessness, with the slow discovery that effort was never really the thing that mattered. Most of us want to believe there is a third option, a world with all of the belief and none of the pressure, all of the open doors and none of the steep climbing, and maybe somewhere there is, but I have not seen it, and I have looked. Sit with that, because it is not an easy question. And anyone who finds it easy has not understood it, has not felt the full weight of both sides pressing in at once. There is no clean answer. And the fact that there is no clean answer is exactly what this video is about, and exactly what makes it worth 20 minutes of your life. If that question landed somewhere real in you, share this video with someone who is wrestling with how hard to push their own children, or wrestling with how hard they were pushed, because this is the conversation underneath that one, the deep one we rarely manage to have, and it can reach them in 20 minutes instead of the years it took me to be able to even ask it clearly. So let me tell you what happened, and what it taught me. My son came out of those gates after the final exam into a crowd of parents pressing forward, every one of them rising on their toes, scanning the river of exhausted teenagers for the one face that was theirs. I searched his face the way every parent around me was searching their own child's face, trying to read years of hope in a single expression, trying to know before he even reached me whether the years had ended in joy or in heartbreak, and he looked tired. Not triumphant, not devastated, just profoundly bone-deep tired. The tired of someone who has emptied themselves completely, who has nothing left because they gave everything they had. And he found me in the crowd, the way a child always finds their mother, and he did not say how he did. He did not say a word about the questions or the answers or the score that would not come for weeks. He said, I did everything I could, and something in me broke open because that was the whole thing, that was everything. That was the entire 18 years distilled into one exhausted sentence from a boy who had just walked out of the hardest morning of his young life. I did everything I could, and in that moment I understood something that all the years of pressure had obscured, something the anxiety had hidden from me right up until it was over, which is that the exam was never really the point. The point was who he had become in order to sit it, the discipline, the ability to work towards something for years without immediate reward in a world that trains everyone to expect reward instantly. The experience of carrying an enormous weight and not collapsing under it. The knowledge earned in his own body and not given to him by anyone's words that he could do hard things. Whatever score came back, and it would be weeks of waiting before it did, he had already become someone who could empty himself completely toward a goal, and that person does not disappear when the exam ends. That person does not depend on the number in the envelope. That person walks into the rest of his life and never entirely leaves. And I realized, standing there in the crowd holding my tired son, that this was what all of it had secretly been for. And this is the thing I most want you to understand, the thing that reframes the entire brutal machine. What looks from the outside like a cruel obsession with a test score is, underneath, a culture trying to give its children something priceless and almost impossible to give directly, which is the lived experience of their own capability. You cannot tell a child they are strong and have them believe it. You can say the words 10,000 times, you can praise them daily, you can fill their room with trophies for participation, and some quiet, honest part of them will still not believe it, because words are cheap and a child knows it. They have to discover it, and there is only one way to discover it, which is by being asked to carry something genuinely heavy and finding, to their own astonishment, that they can. That discovery cannot be given, it can only be earned, and it can only be earned against real resistance, real difficulty, real stakes. The Gaokao, for all its flaws, and they are many, is a society's way of asking every single one of its children to make exactly that discovery at the threshold of adulthood all together on the same day. It says to them, "We are going to ask you to do something very hard, harder than you think you can do. And we are going to believe, even when you do not believe it yourself, especially when you do not believe it yourself, that you are capable of it." And there is a kind of faith in that, a fierce faith in the young, that the modern West, for all its gentleness and all its good intentions, has quietly stopped offering. We have become so afraid of hurting our children that we have started to hide from them the one thing that would make them strong, which is a difficulty large enough to prove to them what they are made of. We protect them from the very struggle that would have shown them their own strength, and then we wonder why they reach adulthood anxious and uncertain and convinced, underneath all our praise, that they cannot handle anything. The Gaokao makes the opposite bet. It is a terrifying bet, and it costs some children dearly, and I will not pretend otherwise. But at its heart is a belief in young people so strong that a whole nation reorganizes itself for a morning to act on it, and I have come to think there is something in that belief we threw away too quickly. There is one more thing about that day that I did not understand until years later, and it is perhaps the strangest and most beautiful part of all, because nearly every adult in China has done this. The official and the farmer, the surgeon and the street sweeper, the famous and the forgotten, so many of them, on some June morning of their own, walked through gates like those and sat in a room like that and carried the same impossible weight. It is a shared memory that runs through an entire civilization, a common threshold that a great many have crossed, and it creates a kind of invisible solidarity that is hard to explain to someone who has not felt it. When my son walked through those gates, he was not only doing a thing for himself and for our family, he was joining something. He was becoming part of a long line of people who had all, at 17 or 18, been asked to find out what they were made of, and had found out and had carried the knowledge of it quietly for the rest of their lives. The teachers cheering at the gates had done it. The police holding the traffic had done it. The volunteers with the water bottles had done it. And so their kindness on that day was not the kindness of strangers. It was the kindness of people who remembered, who knew exactly what that child was walking into because they had walked into it themselves, and who were, in cheering, reaching back across the years to comfort their own younger selves. I think that is why so much of the society goes quiet. Not out of mere respect for a test, but out of recognition. A whole nation remembering its own morning of reckoning and turning, for a day, to hold the next generation as it takes its turn. There is a loneliness in modern life that comes, I think, from having no shared thresholds anymore. No common trials, no moments when a whole community turns toward the same thing at the same time and says, "We have all been here. You are not the first, and you will not be the last, and we are with you." The Gaokao, whatever its cruelty, gives a whole people one of those thresholds. And I did not know how rare and how precious that was until I stood at the gate and felt the weight of millions of remembered mornings pressing gently on that single ordinary one. Now let me be honest about the cost, because I promised I would, and because this channel does not sell you a romanticized culture. The darkness is real, and I will not soften it. There are children who break under this pressure, and I mean that in the most serious way a person can mean it. And I will not dress it up or hurry past it, because to do so would be to lie to you and to dishonor them. There are young people who tie their entire sense of worth to a number and never recover when the number disappoints them, who carry into their 30s and 40s a quiet conviction that they failed at the one thing that mattered, laid down in them at 17 and never fully lifted. There is a narrowing that happens, where a whole childhood becomes about one exam, where curiosity gets crushed into memorization, where the natural hunger to know things becomes a grim machinery of drilling and repetition, where art and play and simple rest and the ordinary wandering joys of being young are sacrificed on the altar of preparation, and some of that is never given back. There are families who cannot forgive a child for a disappointing result, who let their own fear and disappointment leak out as coldness, and children who cannot forgive themselves, and that is a wound that can last a lifetime and pass quietly into the next generation. There are the ones for whom the promise simply fails, who do everything right, who empty themselves completely as my son did and still do not get the future they were told their effort would earn because no system delivers on its promise to everyone, and whose disillusionment is all the more bitter for how completely and how obediently they believed. And there's the deepest danger of all, the one I watched for in myself with a kind of vigilance, which is the way the pressure can curdle into a message that a child is only as valuable as their achievement, that love is a wage paid for performance. That message can hollow out a person just as surely as too much softness can, maybe more surely, because it wears the mask of high standards and good intentions. And a child raised inside it can grow into an adult who succeeds at everything and feels loved for nothing. So I am not standing here telling you this system is good. I am telling you it is not the simple thing you were led to believe, that it contains, tangled together and impossible to fully separate, both a genuine cruelty and a genuine and beautiful faith, and that the challenge, the thing I have wrestled with as a mother through every one of those late lit evenings, is whether it is possible to keep the faith without the cruelty, to believe in a child's capability fiercely enough to ask hard things of them, while never once, not for a single moment, letting them believe they are loved only for what they achieve. And that, in the end, is the question the Gaokao leaves me with, and the question I want to leave with you, because it belongs to every parent in every culture, not just mine. How do you ask a child to become strong without teaching them they are only worth their strength? How do you believe in their capability enough to let them struggle, while making sure they never doubt they are loved regardless of how they perform? The Gaokao gets half of this profoundly right. It believes in the young. It asks great things of them. It refuses the soft lie that says nothing should ever be hard, that a child should be protected from every difficulty, that struggle is a form of harm. And it gets the other half dangerously wrong whenever it forgets that a child is infinitely more than a score, that they were precious before the exam and remain precious no matter what the envelope says, that the number measures one narrow slice of a person on one particular morning and nothing more. When the scores finally came, weeks later, on the day the whole country refreshes its screens with shaking hands, I made myself a promise before I ever looked at his number, and I want to give this promise to you, because it is the only thing I really know for certain after all these years. I promised myself that my face would not change when I saw the number, that, whatever it said, high or low, triumph or heartbreak, my son would see in my eyes the exact same thing he had seen there his whole life, which was that he was loved completely and without condition, that the number was information about a test and not a verdict on his worth, and that he had been treasured long before the exam existed and would be treasured long after the world stopped asking about it. That, I think, is the whole of it. That is the thing the Gaokao cannot teach, but every parent inside it must somehow provide. The unconditional love that makes the high expectations survivable, the safe harbor that makes the terrifying voyage possible. The wisdom is not in choosing between pressure and gentleness, but in offering both at once, the high expectation and the unconditional love, the belief that a child can carry something heavy, and the absolute certainty that they are treasured, whether they carry it or drop it. My son is grown now. The exam is long behind him. The score that once seemed to hold his entire future is a thing he almost never thinks about, a number from a summer long ago. And what remains is not the score. What remains is a young man who knows, in his bones, in a place no one can ever take from him, that he can do hard things, and who knows just as deeply that he was loved every step of the way, before the exam, during it, and long after anyone stopped asking about the result. If I gave him both of those things, then whatever the number was, we passed. If this video shifted something in the way you see pressure, hope, and what we owe our children, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more on how the world's wisest cultures quietly build strong, capable, deeply grounded human beings, subscribe. There's a lot more coming. See you in the next one.